Another week has gone by, meaning another dividend portfolio update to share with all of you. This update in particular is huge after I just booted yet another dividend stock out of my portfolio, scored some more shares worth of 2 other holdings. So with that, are you ready? After a relatively quiet week without a lot of macro news bites driving us in one direction or the other, the overall positive market sentiment keeps us inching higher and higher. And popping open my portfolio tracker with Gitcoin, we can see that my account steadily rose over the course of the last week, along with the market bringing me to a total now of $213,631.65 as of this video, which is a new record high, but only the beginning of what I think is our next bull run, considering interest rates will likely continue to come down. But jumping back on with all of you, this past week was one for the books after I just booted yet another holding out of my portfolio to ultimately achieve my personal goal of a portfolio with 2 ETFs as my investment foundation, with 7 to 10 high conviction stocks scaled above. So as for the dividend stock I booted out of my portfolio, it was Starbucks. But I don't want you to get the wrong idea. My move to actually sell out of the Starbucks position entirely doesn't mean I think Starbucks isn't a solid investment, because if you're long on Starbucks, I certainly think it has some serious turnaround firepower and a lot of potential, especially with Brian Nicole now stepping into the role of CEO and the Starbucks products just being what they are, sugary, addictive, and a luxury status around the world. But I only had 8 shares left of Starbucks as I was slowly trimming out of the position and feel that my capital would have been better deployed elsewhere. Now, I will bring up their income statement and balance sheet just to share my 2 cents there, because as we're going to see, revenue continues to pour in. Their balance sheet, at least at a 50,000 foot view, isn't so pretty, with liabilities that actually outweigh assets, which is not a great sign. Of course, I'm rooting for Brian and the Starbucks team to make some magic happen, but I want to share with all of you shareholders of Starbucks to just keep your eyes on these financial metrics. And personally, I want to be invested into companies that focus on keeping extremely clean balance sheets and maintaining them. So with Starbucks getting the boot, I want to pop back open Gitcoin so you can actually see how my portfolio has transformed with this move. We're going to go to the top right hand corner of the screen to click on show more, and we're going to get my portfolio allocation and see that I am now 46% weighted in stocks, 43% weighted in ETFs, which is pretty substantial as my ETFs continue to get bigger and bigger. Now, I also have this cash position here that is actually not entirely correct as of this recording, because just before hitting record, I actually pumped another $2,000 into my account, so it hasn't quite loaded yet in Gitcoin, but it should really read $23,976,000. It's roughly 10 to 11% worth of my portfolio. And while I do use this cash position to dollar cost average into the S&P weekly, I'm really waiting for opportunities to pile it into a high conviction stock. However, in the meantime, all thanks to Vanguard's settlement fund that pays out a solid dividend distribution, I have no problem just letting the money sit here and produce income. Now, sector-wise, I want to continue here to have you take note that my portfolio is extremely well balanced between growth and reliability, with almost 50% in tech. That's totaling over $105,000. Then we have other here, which is liquid cash and the alike. So we're going to breeze over that to cover healthcare, which makes up about 11.52% of my portfolio, before we tap into $20,000 or 9.5% worth of my portfolio that is invested into consumer discretionary, followed by industrials and real estate at roughly 5% and 3.3% respectively, before we tap into consumer staples at 3% of my portfolio, financials at another 3%, and then a sliver of the energy sector, utilities, and materials as well, which all work out to Vanguard's S&P 500 fund, ticker symbol VOO, coming in at 23% of my portfolio's weight as of this video. Apple, which remains my largest individual holding at 12.6% of my portfolio, or almost $27,000 worth, before I get into the second foundational holding of my portfolio, which is Vanguard's tech fund, ticker symbol VGT. Once again, we have the cash position that should read well over $23,000, so stay tuned for the actual updated portfolio. And then we have Alphabet coming in now over $20,000 worth of my portfolio, Vanguard's total stock market index fund, ticker symbol VTI, which may get the boot come the end of the month or heading into the end of the year. Stay tuned. Then Johnson & Johnson here at 7.7% of my portfolio, roughly $16,000 worth, before we tap into Realty Income, Visa, Lockheed Martin, Amazon, and Tesla for my strictly growth-oriented picks, Coca-Cola, and McDonald's, as well as Darden Restaurants. vanguards. Now, I want to go back to the homepage with you here on Gitcoin and scroll down to actually see Gitcoin's analysis tool of my portfolio, which I think it's interesting to review at least every single month. So clicking into the tool, you're going to see that my personal portfolio scores an 85 out of 100, which means that it's actually pretty safe, secure, and sound in our current economic environment. Note that I am scoring a 10 out of 10 on diversification, and that's even with a much smaller portfolio than I would imagine most of you have. So I'd be super curious to have all of you download Gitcoin to actually see your analysis and what numbers you're coming in with. Let me know in the comments if you go ahead and move forward with that move. But then we score a 9 out of 10 on the risk factor, as well as fees coming in at 9 out of 10, which means that I'm not paying all too much in fees. And again, the portfolio is not too risky. But then we do score a 6 out of 10 on macros. And if we click on that tab, we can get a breakdown of our environment, which comes down to what I always talk about here on the channel: interest rates and inflation. So I personally score lower because all my weight in the tech sector in my portfolio, well, bears a bigger risk in this type of environment. But as a longer term investor with plenty of time to spare in the market, I'm not spooked away in the slightest and actually looking for more and more tech opportunities. Now, last but not least, when it comes to Gitcoin, I will take you over to the dividend tab to show you through what I'm expecting in terms of dividends to come in at the end of the month, just over $285, as you can see here. But that doesn't yet factor in the Vanguard Settlement Fund distributions. So again, I want you to stay tuned for all of that, because I think we're going to have another record month, at least here in October, when it comes to my personal portfolio. But now I want to jump back on screen with all of you and say, if you haven't been tracking your portfolio moves with a portfolio tracker, Gitcoin is what I've personally been using now for the last 2 months. I cannot recommend it enough. If you want to give it a try completely for free, there's a link down there in my description. And before I share my buys in the week, I do want to share that more viewers are actually tuning in every single week, which is great news, but many of those viewers are not subscribed. If that's the case for you, you're roughly the 70% of you watching but not subscribed. I want to go ahead and ask you right now to join me on the channel. Join this journey by subscribing. It makes a world of a difference for me as a creator, and of course keeps me committed to making more content for all of you, with my goal being to produce a video every single day of the week, whether it's stock ideas, macro insights, money talks, or continuing my Masters of the Market series. Of course, I also want you to go ahead and tap on that thumbs up button just to let me know that you enjoy the portfolio update like videos that are just like this. And with that, the buys on the week, we'll kick it off with Alphabet, ticker symbol GOOGL, because that was the one individual stock that I actually bought this week with one more share. $161.26 spent, bringing my total share count up to 129 shares. Now, this is a growing position in my portfolio, as I'm sure you all know, and as the antitrust lawsuit news just continues to sweep the headlines, it's way off its peak of $200 per share, now trading for $162 per share. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily undervalued, but really close there to the fair value price that I'd pay for it, which is good enough for me as a long-term investor. Now, scrolling down, we're going to discover the conviction that drives my Google optimism here, which stems from the revenue that continues to pour in. But I also want you to take note of the balance sheet that is arguably one of the cleanest balance sheets I've ever seen, with $402 billion in assets and $119 billion in liabilities. And should the lawsuits actually bring about a forced split, I actually think it's pretty good news for Google, and it's going to make it a even more powerful, leaner powerhouse when it comes to search, advertising, and of course the usage now of AI. But long term, with the fusion between all three, I really think it's a great opportunity, and I'm just going to continue to dollar cost average into it, growing this position to even bigger stakes. Now, speaking of dollar cost averaging, I did go ahead and just buy another share of Vanguard's S&P fund, ticker symbol VOO, which of course just the safest of bets, with exposure to 500 of the biggest companies in the states that truly drive the market. So I spent about $522.68 in doing so, which works out to $683.94 on the week, and not the biggest of weeks in terms of buying, but heck, I really don't like to buy anyways when the masses of all of you are buying. I like to buy when there's more fear in the streets. However, I do want to know what exactly you've been buying, if you've been focused on any particular stocks, so let me know down in the comments below. Join me here if you haven't yet hit $100,000 in your brokerage account for some tips and tricks on how to do it. Of course, be sure you're subscribed to the channel before you click away, and investors, I'll see you in the next one.